My name is Catherine. I've worked in TU Dublin, what is now TU Dublin, for more than 20 years. I was working on the Blanchardstown campus for a long time, and recently I've started working in the School of Electronic and Electrical Engineering. I've worked for a long time teaching technology-based subjects mainly, but last semester I had an opportunity to teach a research methods for business module. I'm very research active, actually working recently in the last few years on cognition, research into human cognition. So the UDL framework for a long time has been very, very interesting to me for that reason alone. But research and the method of doing research is very, very interesting for that reason. I do believe it's a core and a key, some would say a generic skill, at all levels of education, not just at higher and tertiary level. So moving on, the module in and of itself is a final year module, and usually is at third level. But one of the biggest challenges with teaching it is that it tends to have a very arcane, very academic, for want of a better word, language. And this can be very off-putting to students. I've found in talking to students over the years, it tends to be quite intimidating. So one of the challenges for me as a teacher and a lecturer in it is to sort of bust the myths around the language and to simplify it for students and make it more accessible. And this is for all students. So the thing about it is that research methods, just as a generic skill, is about process. It's about teaching process, because the process is the same for everybody. It's just that the starting point, the idea, and the end point, the outputs of it, are often very, very different and hugely variable and very interesting for that reason. So we teach process. And for very accessible, I found this book by Catherine Dawson, which articulates the 5 W's. The what, the why, the who, the where, is a very, very good textbook to use for that reason. And this is a new copy because I keep loaning it to students and never getting it back. It's great. And the 5 W's, or actually the 6 W's it's become now, is what I use to reflect. Before I entered in and put a UDL lens on this module, I turned that back on the module and looked at it. And I did that with the students on the very first class with the students when they came in. I turned that on the module, on its content. And I said to the students, well, I looked at who the students were, and I said, who are they? What are their requirements? What are their needs? What's to be achieved in the module? Why are we studying this? And in particular, in the context of UDL, why are we doing it this particular way? Now, we have learning outcomes on modules, but also there are the skills required for project work and for further study and further, some go on to do research, some go out and work in the workplace. There's also a very important piece on where and when and how this is to be achieved. And I did this myself, and then I went to the students and said, okay, why have you chosen this? Because some of them choose it as an elective, and that's a very important part of it. So the who of learning. Andrew Brownlee last week in his opening address talked about this really, really well. You know, we have to look at who we have in front of us. And great line from one of my colleagues, I teach whoever is in front of me. I don't worry too much about what they are. We have to teach everybody. We don't teach to an average, you know. So some of our students choose this as an elective and some have to be there. And the group I had were 3 groups of students all doing different programs with some similarities but a lot of difference. So some had to work in groups, some were choosing to do it as an elective on their own. There were several students with learning disabilities. We also had floaters that Frederick Fove was talking about last week. They were students who are not necessarily registered, but do have issues, and these need to be accommodated and looked after. There were several students English not their first language. In addition, and this is through talking with the peer triad, there are students with other things in their lives, mature students with families, part-time students in part-time employment, also assessment, and this module is 100% continuously assessed. So these things have to be taken into consideration. We have to talk to our colleagues about what's going on in other modules in the program and look at it at program level. The student voice. I'm involved in a project currently in TU Dublin on a curriculum framework. So we were doing a lot of data collection from our students on what they thought about teaching, learning and assessment. So as the module is 100% assessed, we were asking students, how is teaching, learning and assessment for you? What are we doing well and what would you change given a choice? So The group I had, the 3 groups I had together, were very, very vocal about this. They were great, in fact. You can see from the graphic here that they gave me a lot of feedback in class and verbally as well on what they would like to change and how they would like to input. They did appreciate getting input from the outset on this module, and also had a lot to say about assessment and assignment, the mode of engagement, how stuff was being represented to them, and how they got to submit and engage with assignments. So that was very helpful to me. Now for the review, there were 4 assignments. And initially looking at this, trying to be very, I suppose, engineering about it and planning it all out, I said, okay, I'm going to do assignment 1 as I'm going to do different modes of representation and engagement, and then maybe another assignment, then I'll do the action and expression. It didn't quite work out that way because I was actively engaging the students in the process. So for assignment 1, I said I would incorporate brainstorming and mind mapping using online collaborative tools, because this is what the students were asking for, and they wanted to engage with using that type of work to facilitate group work, and also so they could work online at home and more flexibly, engage more flexibly with the work. But they also wanted to use written submission as well, because that's typically how projects are written up. Literature review is normally written submission. We said we'd leave that as it was. However, what happened was the work in assignment 1 bleeds into assignment 2, so that didn't quite work out that way. Assignment 3, then there were choices of written posters and short video submissions, and I created resources then to support all that work. So this is what assignment 1 looked like in practice. The Moodle page resources were put up, and we use mind mapping. I love mind mapping. I've used it for years, and it was great fun actually to be able to share this with students and say, well, this is when, I'm given a big open project to do and I don't really know where to start. I just start brainstorming and mind mapping. We did do work using pen and paper as well, and students who were more comfortable with that or using a whiteboard did that, and then others used the online. Ultimately, the whole class, I think everyone in the class used the online resource that I put up because it was collaborative, it was free to use, and it was easy to use and very accessible, so they did that. They also, I needed ultimately to put up how-to type videos, and what I did find with this, although YouTube is this great resource and it's free and accessible, it is a little bit of a rabbit hole. You can go into YouTube and start looking up how-tos and end up there an hour later and you still haven't found what you need to do to get an assignment done. So I found very short, less than a minute, screencasts of how to share a link out to your colleagues or how to incorporate a link into a Word document. Worked much better in order to assist students to get assignments done. These were final year students and needed to get and had a lot of assignment work, so that worked a lot better. What I did find I had to change was initially this was representation and engagement, but students actually asked for me to include mind maps in their assessment. Using Coggle was the mind map software that they used, and this is a gallery, and this is just a quick look at some of their work, and you can see it's as individual as each of the students that used it. The student voice, it's hard to summarize all of this, but if I were to do it thematically, it would be more flexible, easier to use. We used it in other assignments, facilitated group work, and we could focus on information and synthesis instead of yet more academic writing and more writing. Assignment 3, this is where really my hands came away from this and the students took charge. I put up just a couple of links. Most of the links you can see on this slide to resources, the students came up with themselves. Some of them were using these already in other projects and even things outside the college that they might have used in their part-time employment. And they suggested them to me on a forum on Moodle, and I put them up. We did some discussions in class on posters, on good poster design. Pinterest is very, very good for this type of graphic design type work as well. And off they went. I have to say, this was coming up to Christmas, this assignment, and they just took off. And just showing this work is really amazing. This is one of the favorite slides I've ever put together on any piece of work, and I'm teaching over 20 years, so this is really did blow me away on the variability, the diversity of the work they did, and the amount of effort they put into this, and how much they enjoyed it, because the feedback was really good. Again, variable. Some of them were looking for marks for design on their work, which wasn't actually part of the assessment rubric. And things I've learned talking with colleagues, we have a great community of practice here, and just to run through it. If I were giving anyone advice on engaging with the UDL framework or looking at this, I agree with what the other two presenters made. You don't have to change everything. Take it slow, be measured about it, reflect on your practice, review it. It doesn't have to be the entire module. Pieces of it are enough because you'll find it will flow. It's not always about technology, funny thing to say, in these times at the moment, and certainly after what happened earlier. But to me, the message that I learned, the biggest learning for me, was that it was more about learner agency than it was actually about the technology or anything I did. Giving the students the power, if you like, and relinquishing your own power. I think it was Dara said that last week, was the most important thing about this process for me. It was engaging them with it, explaining what UDL was, and explaining how important it was that their voice was heard and listened to and acted upon was the most important piece. Choice and examples, but not too much or too many, because of their agency and their voice, was very important. Considering all cohorts and their context, what's going on in their lives, is very important too. Some of the comments that came back, and I couldn't represent them all here, were very telling to me during the process and afterwards for this. If teaching is all about communication, good teaching to me is all about collaboration, and the best form of teaching for me is about forming communities of practice. Etienne had a great presentation last week about this, and I had an opportunity while doing this to contribute to an open ebook on doing mind maps, and the students actually contributed some of theirs, the links to theirs for this. And that to me was the absolute pinnacle of doing this work, that we could do that work together as a part of this. And there's a link to that at the end of the presentation. The main change agent in this is not always the lecturer. I really should cross out always and say that it is rarely, if this is done right, it's rarely the lecturer, and it's the students are driving this if you're working in partnership with them. And that's the main learning as well for me. It's about agency, and it's about them working in partnership with you. And the last two pieces of advice I think to anyone I give is be agile, be prepared to change midstream with them if you can, and be patient. Not something I'm blessed with, but it's something I really did learn in this. And the final thing I'd say then is be patient. The very final thing I'd say, which is 11, is enjoy it. Previous presenter, this was one of the best experiences I had.